let's get started. So, Fred, you wanted to have the session, so is there any topic? Yeah. So are there any topics you guys want to discuss, or?
Well, it's obvious topics like
Right. So
we
Can someone grab the door?
we had a close relationship with Canonical and Ubuntu and the Ubuntu community for years. Well, there were some decisions. You stopped for the cycle. You didn't track the development version of GTK and stuff. And well, we.
Like, I'm sorry, I misheard the last part.
You didn't follow the development cycle? You kept track of it? Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
And that was one important Ubuntu contribution. That was for all the people using Ubuntu. Well, and testing our development release. So, well, we decided yesterday or 2 days ago that we'd go with packaging 3.1 in oneiric, so it's back on track on this part. But still, there's some issue now between people from Canonical and Ubuntu pushing patches. The patches are not accepted, or they are. We do not want distro patches to stay in Ubuntu for years, but we do not have a good process to accept them. We do not have many persons reviewing patches. And well, so we need to improve the situation.
Yeah, I think in general there is some friction going on, probably, like between several people, like
Yeah.
in the different communities, and like if there is anything we can do to work together and fix that, I think that would be a good thing.
About the patches thing, we have a session later, I think.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, so let's take that specifically.
So I think one big thing is there seems to be some people in Gnome who are defining it as this unmodifiable thing, and that just simply isn't going to work the way we use it. So I think we need some clarification. Is that actually the position of Gnome, or whatever Gnome means? Because that is going to be a huge conflict. We're not going to deliver the vanilla upstream Gnome experience. We're going to deliver a bunch of little pickers.
Right.
We think it's best.
I asked the same question recently. I started a small conversation among the board, for example, about how this is, and most of the feedback that I've gotten, I think, is that people are generally open to Gnome being used as a platform. I sense that there are a lot of people in the project that, maybe didn't get the memo. Well, I don't want to say this, but that are really keen on the idea of having Gnome as a product, and seeing that if we really focus all of our development energy on going towards Gnome, then we're not splitting our resources and worrying about this thing that's not important to our story. But of course, we are concerned about our downstreams, and I think certainly at the management structure of the project, and probably the community at large, we do care about downstreams who are not the full Gnome experience. Now, of course, this story as a downstream changes depending on who you approach within the project, and the phase of the moon and some other things. And sometimes you get told, okay, we'll take your patch, it's not great for us, but we understand you have this. And sometimes you get told, well, fuck off. I do think that we are working internally, I can tell you this now, to improve the consistency of this message across the project. And I don't say what the decision is about, but I have a feeling that it will be towards more openness to the needs of downstreams that are not the Gnome desktop. But that's a decision that we're having.
So things like not being able to extend the control center and stuff, that feedback is getting back to those modules?
Yeah, and in fact, that's a discussion that's going fairly well right now.
Oh, okay.
And at the same time, this is something, if you really want it to work this way in the control center to make the, what is it, like, I'm not a programmer, the API public.
Yeah, so
Make sure to push that, like, really hard. Don't be, like, lazy and hope it will be fixed or, like, get disappointed when it doesn't, but really do the work to talk those people into making the API public, if that is the case. Like, really put some time into that, because, like, this is the time to do that.
So a large part of the situation with GNOME is that right now, as it is, some people believe it's a good thing, some people believe it's a bad thing, but as it is right now, maintainers have ultimate control.
Right, right.
The way to have influence in GNOME, and the reason that the control center discussion is even happening at all, is because you have a control center maintainer standing directly behind you.
Right.
If you collaborate more in the upstream community, providing more developer resources, you get more maintainers, you get more influence, you get more of what you want.
and you don't have to ask permission to purchase in those specific modules.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess it's like a question of like, do you want to be a pure consumer that just like hopes that things will go right, or do you want to like help shape the future?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to be an active participant or just a consumer that
And
like hopes?
both approaches are completely all right, but when you take one approach and you send the message that you're taking the other approach, then it's when things become. And I'll put one example. Sun Microsystems used to have a very specific, way to packaging GNOME. They were not working on the Linux kernel, so they have their own specific flavor. But they would never complain about things being Linux specific. There was never some engineer saying, why is this so Linux specific? They just, took their usability and said, well, this is our part, we take it. And so, you see a point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I do.
And it's one thing to come to the table and say, well, we're doing all the work, we're writing the patches, all you have to do is submit them. But you're just doing work that's helpful for you, and it's not generally
Right,
useful
so-
for other users.
Right, but in that case, for those, I didn't even get a conversation. It was just, sorry, not interested. So what am I supposed to do now?
Well, I'm saying that,
Yeah.
that the fact.
When the answer is already like, that's not the answer that was given to me. It wasn't just, hey, give me this patch. It was like, the answer is no. And there's no place to go after
So
that.
there's two things here. One is that, yes, this is a problem that we have now, and we're looking for a way to fix it.
Mhm.
Two is that this is a long-term problem that has developed over time, simply because you do not have as much influence in GNOME as you could.
Right.
And if you contributed more developer resources, you would have much more influence in GNOME.
Okay.
Here. Why are you sitting right here?
I was taking notes.
Well, you should have.
Ryan, but that, we think there should be more developer resources to, I don't know. You said something about, except for just that, like, solve your own.
I mean, like upstream maintainers who are actually maintaining upstream projects, actively doing a lot of like the grunt work that nobody cares about, like rolling the releases all the time and like the things that keep the project afloat.
Right, but I guess I would say like Ubuntu also has all that work. So like,
Yes.
you can't really be asking people to like, have a full-time job getting Ubuntu out and then only be able to influence upstream GNOME. They also have a full-time job getting GNOME out.
Well, so the elephant in the room is Red Hat, I guess, and a lot of people think Red Hat has too much control. The reason they have that control is because they do give developers full-time to work on GNOME. And they managed to do that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's why they have so much influence.
And the way our structure works is really like maintainers, to an extent, have really a lot of power. Like they are like the final gatekeepers. And then the release team can say like, no, we're not packaging this module, but they're really the gatekeepers.
I think to be
You certainly don't mean to imply though that you have to be like full-time working on GNOME, like that has to be your full-time job for you to be able to like positively influence.
The amount of influence is certainly proportional to the amount of effort. And maybe even like,
Well,
like at
effort-
the first, some small effort would really be a big improvement in influence, I think. And like certainly what Robert's doing with like DM, if this becomes an upstream of Gnome, that's really a positive thing in my opinion, because like maybe we say, not to offend anybody, but like GDM certainly has maintenance problems. And if we have someone who's employed by Canonical maintaining something that's a core part of our desktop, that's a real win for us. And like it doesn't have to be like something that is like even necessarily like a straight GNOME component, but it's something that you guys are putting in effort that's directly benefiting all GNOME users, not just the ones that are using
But-
Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Is the direction and the focus of GNOME based upon the amount of contribution, therefore? So what I'm asking is, if somebody who, I'm not saying this is canonical, but if an organization who contributes less makes contributions or makes recommendations for GNOME that would arguably be strategically better decisions, but they contribute less, would that be not listened to in the interests of greater contributions that might not necessarily innovate in the best ways?
Well, a good strategy is good strategy. I think we welcome suggestions about what we're doing wrong, and we think about if it benefits us. As for how you can have other influences on GNOME, there's the advisory board, of course. I don't really, I'm not familiar with that process because I've never been inside of the board. There's the release team. They also take decisions, and of course there is the board. These two guys would be better to talk about it, like setting direction of the project and how you can have an influence.
Yeah, because I think it's, just in my mind, if Red Hat are contributing most of the engineering time to GNOME, it seems absolutely fair that Red Hat have a big say in the way the project is organized, because they contribute. That's the way open source has always worked, right? And the only thing that worries me at times, and I think where some of the conflict has occurred, is
Non-hacker contributions.
is essentially in the strategic direction of the project and how it's going to meet various needs. And it doesn't seem clear to me how strategic direction is defined.
That's a problem we have, and it's a problem that we know we have.
Well, what I'd like to know is how can Canonical or anybody else, how can we help solve that problem? Because there's certain limitations in how much develop time Canonical can throw at GNOME, because we're building Ubuntu. And Ubuntu leverages chunks of GNOME, but not all of GNOME. But I'm curious to see how we can, in the interest of improving the health of the GNOME project and improving the relationship, how can we help to define that direction and solve that problem?
I mean, like, defining direction, I mean, like, it's really boring that you run around at a conference and, like, grabbing people and, like, trying to help them, like, hey, I have this great idea how we could do our module software organization.
Right.
Like, Valsar ran around, like, for 2 years straight, basically, and, like, just poking people, and I have this idea how things should be done.
But if I flew out to a conference,
Mm.
to the Desktop Summit, and did that, would my contributions be ignored because we don't contribute as much engineering time?
I don't know, I mean, like, it's a bureaucracy thing. I mean,
Right, and that's the question. I mean, if the
You
answer is
need a
yes,
bunch
then the
of,
answer is
like,
yes. I
credits
mean,
in
that's what
order-
I was curious about is the direction and the strategic focus of GNOME essentially driven by the level of engineering time
Yes.
donated to the project?
Not only engineering, also design. Like for example, for 3.0, whenever a new feature is added, they need to go through design, so it's not
Right.
really engineering time, no?
The problem
So
that you would
also
face,
influence.
the problem that you would face, and you wouldn't face at university, you could go to some maintainers, and again, if you convince them this is generally good for the GNOME project, we don't say, well, we don't like this idea because it came from Jonah. I mean,
Yeah.
but we say, oh, you're trying to convince us of something that's useful to you.
Yeah, but the work is up to them, so that's.
Yeah, why
that's the
should I
real
do,
problem. It's not
why
that
should
you
I do
be
what you
ignored.
ask?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's probably a good idea, but then, you know, that particular person or that group of person have a particular focus, and
Right.
shifting that focus without commenting, without showing that, you know, proving that your ideas work.
I mean, yeah.
Is this pursuant to your question, Robert? Like, did you get an answer?
Sorry?
Did you get an answer to your question?
Did I ask a question?
the product versus,
Oh.
like, how do we make libraries that are amazing to Kindle? I guess.
So it seems that you've done the product versus platform. you don't really have much control over it. It's whatever the maintainer does, right?
I think I gave the best answer that we can presently give to that question.
But I think it's also like a bit of a discussion that is like currently up in the air. And if you want to pull things in a certain direction, then certainly do that. Because like it's like this big rock, and you have like different strings going from it, and you have like people who pull the strings, and they can pull them in like very different directions.
The more people pull in one particular direction,
and then it happens. And
I guess I worry that contributors, they will just buy into whatever the loudest viewpoint is, and that kind of reinforces it.
what's that again? Sorry.
So people who aren't in the middle of all this are
I
just
think,
going,
GNOME
is
community
now,
members, or
yeah, people, yeah, community saying,
Maybe maintainers of smaller projects.
okay.
kind of see this, oh, you know, well, we're not GNOME anymore because we're not having, it's not exactly the same stack, it's not GNOME shell, so we're kind of being pushed out of GNOME,
oh well.
and that's not helping collaboration.
Something in a way, I mean, like with the module set reorganization, which was like a very big thing in general. Like we have a small core, and then we have things around, and like I think like the main thing from Vincent, for example, and Lucas, who was writing this, was that they really wanted to be more inclusive in general. Like we're not choosing between like Banshee and Rhythmabox. We love both of them. Like none of them are in our big bundle release thing, but they're both like within the wider community, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, yeah, that also makes, oh, so now we have a core, and that is closer to a product, I guess.
And certainly, if this is where you're going, GNOME Shell is in that core, and GNOME Shell is our focus. And that's what we want to promote.
Is in that core, you said.
Is, yes, most certainly.
And then what
It's
about-
at the core
So
of
that,
the
doesn't
course.
that?
So two
like,
MP3
against the
players
whole
okay, two
platform?
desktops not okay.
Well, no, because there are 0 MP3 players in the core.
Okay, I see,
Yeah,
Because you kicked that
those
out.
are outside.
Okay.
And I guess like to some extent we need to have something in our core. We could have, I guess we could have Node stuff in our core, and we would just have a bunch of libraries. And like this is really good for building, I don't know, OLPC or Kindle, or like some crap we
Or
never
maybe-
knew was existed. Like, wow, this runs
Yeah.
like GNOME, really?
It just, yeah, I mean, it strikes me that the reason why there's, well, one of the reasons why there's been the conflict between the two projects, I think, is because I don't think the expectations have been particularly well understood. Because I think the relationship between Ubuntu and GNOME has evolved over the years, and GNOME has evolved independently, and Ubuntu's evolved independently. Like, when I got involved in GNOME, and I'm a hanger-on, the concept of code talking to that level didn't seem the same, as much the same back then as it does today. And I think just understanding those expectations, even if those expectations are uncomfortable expectations, that the projects are now not as compatible as they used to be, I think is a good thing. It's a good thing for us to understand them and define them better. Like it seems to me that if there was 10 people in a room thinking of the strategic direction of GNOME, and 5 of those people work at Red Hat, then basically it's going to be Red Hat's vision. Because Red Hat are contributing the most engineering to GNOME.
Right,
And there's nothing wrong with coming to that conclusion
No.
if that's the way the project works. But I think the problem is if we think the project doesn't work that way, and GNOME doesn't think that Ubuntu works a certain way,
Yeah,
then that's where all this bickering
I
happens.
completely agree that this has been mostly a confusing messaging problem from both sides.
Yeah. I think we just need to like sit down and say honestly, how are the projects functioning? What's the deal? Like not what's the politics, what's the actual day-to-day dealings of how these projects run.
And then like, I guess one question I have is like, what does the Ubuntu project want and need out of the GNOME project? And being like straight up with that, like we really see this as
So-
a vessel of whatever.
I think
Maybe
as,
at a macro level.
I think as I'd say, it's just, and this is just one opinion.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Rick's
You're right.
really better aligned to answer than me. I'd say that what we're trying to do in Ubuntu, our mission hasn't changed. We want to deliver the best free software that we can, the best free software platform, of which the Gnome platform is a key component, of which Gnome applications are a key component. I'd say where things are different, where we differ to Fedora, is Fedora will basically ship upstream Gnome. And talking to the Fedora team, they're pretty straightforward about this. Like, we'll modify it, we'll change it wherever, in small areas like default wallpaper, that kind of stuff. But we just basically want to ship default Gnome. And I don't think that in Ubuntu we feel that same. If we believe it's going to make better sense for our users to switch things around, then we're happy to do that. And that's where there's the divergence. Is that Gnome is seen by some obviously as a platform, and some are seen as a desktop environment,
And I mean, like, different companies have different ways of approaching that as well.
Yeah.
Like, if Novell wants to change something in their default setup, now I took Novell, but it could be right. Then they push that change in our community while you had it on
So
top.
what Jonas said, so in the first years we indeed treated GNOME more like a product, and indeed our mission had been to ship like the very best GNOME we can get in Ubuntu. But as we, let's say, evolved as a company and evolved as a distribution and a project, I think right now we treat GNOME more like a platform, because we started to do things like DX and Unity, etc. So I don't think it's fair to say we haven't changed our attitude towards GNOME. I think we did.
we definitely
In
did.
quite some
I
big
think you're
ways.
shifting to a model, a similar relationship than Nokia used to have when they were shipping their Fremantle.
Was that Mimo?
Yeah.
The Hilden, that's not.
Yeah, so they were doing their own stuff, but the messaging was clear. We're doing our own stuff,
Yeah.
we'll help when we can, but when we can't, we won't.
So when Ubuntu started out, I think it was way more like Fedora.
Yes.
And then over the years, little additions have been like this. I think that's just been, as a project, understanding our users more and more and what they want.
Yeah, the thing is you got a design team way before GNOME upstream, you got a design team.
Yeah.
And the conflict is not really at the engineering part. We need to align both our design team, because Ubuntu is driven by the desktop experience team, the design team, and we want the same in the GNOME. And that's the people we need to connect.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that cooperation at the engineering level is a big problem right now. I mean, at least from what I've seen in the desktop team, I mean, we don't personally have any problems with talking to other person and GNOME and say, hey, what do you think about this patch? And we get them in, etc. But it's not, we don't do this as our main, let's say, focus. Our main focus is not improve GNOME, but build this Ubuntu product. And then as part of that, we also work on parts of GNOME. But it's not our primary focus in as big sense as it used to be in a couple of years ago, I think.
The other thing, which is slightly different now, is we care, I guess Ubuntu cares more about other, like for instance Qt, putting on the CD, making sure all Qt apps work perfectly. KDE as well, if you're going to write a indicator or something, it works in KDE, it works in Ubuntu, Unity, whatever. And it seems, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, whatever, but GNOME is like, it's all it is. There's only GNOME.
Yeah, it's all about the blessed set.
Right, and that would cause different types of, actually at the engineering level,
Right,
issues.
and there's two different ways of doing engineering. We, I think in GNOME, really are on the side of we want the world to be this way, and we really drive things towards this way. And it's not always easy to make a product on this. On the other hand, you guys really are on the side of like, we have to deal with every single case, and like, let's have a million crazy workarounds for everything and deal with all the broken
I
cases.
think it's a workaround.
That's true.
I think we worked with KDE, you guys don't.
No, I
really
mean,
care
like, I'm
for
thinking.
that specific use case. And I think as we move further on, even like the base things inside, say, shell, how you get your list of applications, things like that. The way
Okay,
we
this is
think
what I'm
of it
talking
is
about.
like, does it work with KDE? Does it work with plain Qt? Does it work with GTK?
Yeah, and you
that's how we
really
think.
look at everything though.
We
And,
have to think of
like,
the
and for
desktop,
example.
and you guys have to think of non-desktop, so you can
Yeah.
take certain shortcuts as well. Right?
Exactly, and we can make assumptions that, for example, applications will be well behaved, and we expect this from them. You have a more open attitude, but necessarily you need more hacks to deal with that.
It's not really hacks. We just need to have a little bit.
Like
you know,
Jason's telling me about like some of the crazy things Banff is doing in order to like
For
deal with
LibreOffice.
Java applications and stuff like this. We don't want to do this kind of stuff, and this is a different technical
Sure,
opinion.
but so then you get engineering conflicts as well.
And that means that we're always going to have diffs from
Right.
upstream Gnome if you don't want to deal with that stuff. And that should be expected.
Yeah.
Right.
And
It can't be
I don't-
really.
I don't-
But for us,
I get
for users,
frustrated.
the windows need to match in Banff, and that's just something we have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's one of the things is you can't say, we don't want people to vendor patch when you are in fact say, that we have different philosophies. And to get to our philosophy, we're going to have to vendor patch.
Right.
I don't think that people are too concerned about that anymore.
Oh, okay.
Like, there was this message that we want a great GNOME experience, and when you were doing that and you were shipping GNOME, but there was like really a huge delta, this was bothering us. But I think now that it's clear that you're sort of moving away, you're pursuing your own strategy, like really, lots of people are okay with this. Like, if you have the clarity of message and you say, this is kind of like what Nokia was doing, like really, you don't have much problem with this.
So,
It's also, the burden is on our side anyway, so. I
There
think
is
we
some
have
lost
to-
opportunity there, I'm sorry. We're writing free software,
Yes.
and it
So are
does
they.
seem like, it seems like we spend like so much time focusing on like that area, like the areas that divide us and discuss those, and like this precious little time talking about like, you know, a body of free software here, a body of free software here, surely.
If we should
tear
talk more,
them,
we have more in
there'd be-
common than we don't.
Yeah, there'd be like ample opportunity to
It's-
collaborate.
I joined the GNOME project before I joined Ubuntu, and I feel while I feel more aligned to Ubuntu these days than GNOME, I still feel it's a commitment to GNOME. And I would say that we can't move on in our relationship until we set these expectations clearly. And then we can work on how we relate together under those understood constructs of our relationship. And being honest, I think that we're pretty clear in Ubuntu about what we're doing. We do take into account KD, we do take into account these different elements. We are going to drive in a direction that brings value to our users. And if that means that we're going to be encompassing GNOME and we're going to be encompassing other bits and pieces, then that's fine. The thing I think is unclear, being frank, is I don't feel like it's very clearly understood what GNOME's strategic position is as to whether you're a full environment, in other words, building an operating system, or whether you are a platform.
I gave the best answer that we can. to that
No, and I
question.
appreciate that, and I'm not saying that we need to find that answer today, but I'm saying that what worries me is I don't think we can actually have a fruitful relationship until some
We can
closure
figure
is
out.
defined on
Right.
that. And that the GNOME project may say, look, we're both. We are a platform and we are building it.
Well, we certainly are both, but the question is, how much consideration do we give to your needs when we're building our platform? And that's the open.
Yeah, and that may be little.
And another thing,
But I think if we
guess, is-
understand that, then at least we understand that. The problem is that the expectations of Ubuntu is probably different to the expectations of certain parts of GNOME.
On the other hand, we could use some clarity from your side in terms of exactly what Unity is. Like, I don't think anybody in GNOME credibly believes that Unity is like an alternative to GNOME shell in some way within the GNOME project.
Why?
Why is
No, he said within the GNOME project. Because it was a
Oh.
wholly conceived, designed, developed,
Yeah.
delivered outside of the GNOME.
Unity is not GNOME,
Yeah.
it is not a part of GNOME. But it is based on GNOME technologies. It's built with GNOME. This is fine. If you follow this line,
Right.
like much more clearly, instead of saying, well, we tried to become part of the GNOME project, but like we were shunned, like this is really, really not helpful at all.
Well,
It's not helpful, but it's also kind of the reality as well, to a degree. I mean, I believe that we
Well,
can.
that would be that fair to say. I mean, the indicators were a different story because indicators is more like running, but for Unity, we really did push for doing our own thing pretty early on.
And
So I
even-
don't think we can now credibly say we got rejected or so.
Yeah.
No, but
At least from my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it still is free software, it could be
Yeah, I
adopted
mean-
by the
Yes.
GNOME.
I'm not saying I'm
Please.
not happy about, like,
I don't think anybody in GNOME has a problem on Canonical doing something.
yeah.
And please say that you use GNOME technologies and that you're built with GNOME and that this is your platform. But what you're doing is not GNOME. And like, really, we're totally okay with that.
Right.
This brings a lot of memories when the Ubuntu project started and the whole Debian Ubuntu
Yeah.
debate.
So, but I think it would be helpful as part of defining what GNOME is, have a need for that, and it's like, what our requirements are for that. When we say using Gnome technology.
Like branding guidelines.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, absolutely, and we are working on this internally as well.
Yes.
So I think
Okay, so
that's
that-
useful. So
that's
when we
nice
say
to know.
something, it's not like, oh, they just made up a new term.
Yeah.
Gnome needs.
And official.
Yeah, I guess that one of the problems is you as an organization have a clear structure to be able to decide and communicate that particular direction or statement, whereas in GNOME, you know,
I've definitely
things are
noticed
more.
that. We're a very hierarchical top-down structure, and so that brings like, we can align quickly and move forward. And then when we take, like, well, when I take those, like, you know, from my position to the leaders at GNOME, in GNOME, they're like very receptive and open, and, but not able to say, okay, we decided this, therefore it's gonna get pushed
Yeah,
down.
we
and
don't-
happen. So,
And it's because of our structure, maintainers have
which is
control.
good, and I do have to say that, you know, I've talked to a lot of people about GNOME, about these issues, and I've always good intentions on both sides. I've never had an experience where I felt like somebody was, like, trying to undermine or saying something that they knew was not true or anything like that. So I think there's a good, like,
Yeah.
overall foundation to collaborate, and I can see this, the way I put it was, GNOME is either a platform with a default experience, or it's a default experience, or it's an experience supported by a platform. And I'm with you, I think that is still being discussed within GNOME, and I don't think that's,
Well, it's not, I think, it like really, really actively is, like emails going back and forth while I'm here.
yeah, so that should be interesting. So, but I do think, like, pursuant to that, I can, like, actually kind of directly answer your question. Like, there's two things that I see that would be something that I would ask for on behalf of the GNOME project. The first thing is, like, we use GNOME applications. We love them, we make sure they fit into our desktop, but we have some, like, different experiences, and sometimes these require patches. It is way easier for us if we can get those patches upstream. I understand sometimes it's actually not useful for the application developer to have a patch upstream because they don't run Ubuntu, and if they change the code, it's hard for them to validate it. But sometimes they do run Ubuntu, and I worry that as there's a perception of conflict, which may or may not be there, but there's a perception of conflict, some people may think it's just better not to take the patch to make it work on Unity. And so if that can be avoided, also I'm sure Mamo feels the same way, and you know, like, it's just easier if the application developer doesn't feel like they're undermining GNOME if they.
Let me tell you what I think is really the most common case of what's happening. And I don't think it's like, oh, like canonical.com email address, like I ignore this. I think, like in your typical example, you guys need something done in, say, GTK or something like this. You approach the project and you say, I want this feature because we need it in Unity. And the maintainer says, well, this isn't really helping GNOME, and my focus is on GNOME. So I'm sorry, I'm going to reject your patch because this is not my focus, this is not what I care about. And like, there's really this idea that if we focus on really making our experience the best and put all of our resources into this is a better way for us to win.
So what you're saying is GTK is in a general toolkit?
No,
People
hold
can
on,
use
hold
it.
on. I'm not done.
Oh, okay.
This is one kind of opinion, and this will be a kind of response that you get from some maintainers. And of course, going back to the maintainer-centric model, they're fully free to say this. And again, it's not on the basis of we want to screw you guys. It's on the basis of this is what I care about. This is my module. I'm the maintainer. This is my priority. I'm trying to do good work, and I think that this honestly is the best way for me to do that. Going back to how you could deal in this environment better as a company. Seriously, just like if you get up there and you're doing work, and you get more credibility in the community at large, and people see that you're doing things, you gain more influence. Get a few maintainers in some packages. This is a way that you can get what you want to a far greater extent.
But how
It's
does-
really
But
meritocracy.
even if you do that,
That's not,
no, but sorry. Even if you do that, if GTK is an excellent example. If there's something in GTK which helps Unity do something or works better inside Unity, and Shell aren't interested in the feature, what do? It's like the base of our operating system, and we know the maintainer. Most of the time's not interested. So what?
Okay, so I
to
can
get into
tell
that
you,
position in control center,
I
you
can-
could do that with
hey,
a couple of
I have a
maintainers.
very good story about this, which is that I had a problem a couple of years ago myself, that I was kind of an outsider to the same maintainer. in context of glib.
Right.
Everybody seemed to agree that this G settings thing was like really cool and it was like the future. I was getting 0 play.
Sure.
It kind of sucked. I wish that there was a better way we could have dealt with it. How it ended up is we got together at Boston. We talked about, okay, this is the plan going forward. And I got into a position with glib, and I merged like gvariant and like some GNIO code and G settings, and now I have like dconf, G application. Like really, like once you break this barrier and you get like the first generally useful thing in there, the barrier to future contribution is almost non-existent. Like I'm at the point where if I want to change something in glib, and again, we're talking to the same person, I have really a lot of authority to just go in there and do it, especially if it's related to one of the things that I'm working on. I don't ask him, okay, well, is this feature generally useful to you? I'm like, okay, this is my area. This is something that I can do. And this is what I'm talking about. Like if you are doing generally useful work and you get into the community, then you really have a lot of freedom and liberties to go with
And
that.
you're not,
Again, I mean,
you're not working on glib full time anymore.
No, I'm not.
So I have to
What do you
be honest,
do?
it's the same for PyG object for me. So like I started with few small patches, and these days I basically don't have to ask anymore, I just commit it. I mean, of course I don't commit stuff which is like huge and changes the focus of the project, but like by this time people know me and it's a lot easier to talk to them and say, hey, can we get this in?
But do you need, are you asking them to carry patches that create alternate behavior in like stock Gnome distros versus Ubuntu? Or are you just enhancing it, the same enhancement is relevant to every?
Yeah, that's what I said. So I commit bug fixes without asking, but if I change some or introduce new behavior, then I do ask.
But that
I mean,
new
if I
behavior-
ask, then people already know me and they are probably more likely to listen to me at least.
Is that new behavior Ubuntu specific behavior or is
No,
it?
no.
Right, so it's like a bit different than asking.
Yeah, but
like-
can you imagine
Yeah, of course,
hypothetically?
it's not the same example. I realize that. I was just pointing out that like, getting to know people really helps a lot.
Right.
But the thing is,
But saying like go back in time, like okay, you have a need that you need now go back in time and
Well,
also have a full-time job.
That's really what happened, right? I mean, like Mark started out saying, we're going to be a distribution, and what distributions do is distribute. And like, this was like the start of the problem, I guess. We sort of expected more from you guys, and we weren't getting it. And that's like what kind of started this, canonicals not pulling their weight upstream. And that's what sort of turned into the situation we have now. Now I think, so Mark's argument at the time was that we don't want to have like really a lot of engineers writing software. We want to be small, like really efficient. Now we see that you really have like really a lot of engineers, and you're still saying we can't afford to put people on upstream.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and
Like I can't, we can't tell people that you need to have, you know, another full-time job. It takes like a lot of work to turn the crank on Ubuntu every 6 months.
yeah, but
Can I ask you a question, Ryan? So in the example of something like GTK is a good example. If someone proposed a patch that would optimize GTK for behavior in Unity is one such example. It sounds like what you're saying is that it would likely be rejected because canonical don't contribute much to
No.
development.
No, that's not what I
the
said.
real problem is that what this particular, maintainer will say is like, how do I take care of this code moving forward? Who's going to take care of
Right.
it? I can't because my focus is not on Unity and
Right.
Ubuntu.
So we can't just throw the
his-
code over the
his
wall and expect
concern-
him to maintain
His
it.
concern is more about maintainability
Right.
than this kind of.
I'm sorry, there's also the complications.
I guess what I'm getting at is, this gets back to the platform or platform with the default experience kind of thing. It sounds like the changes that benefit the default experience of Shell are a no-brainer. I mean, that's a good thing that goes in there. But it sounds like the changes that might only benefit the platform or benefit a different experience will be less interesting for various reasons. And
just naturally so.
sorry?
Just naturally so.
Right. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we are, in the Ubuntu world, if we are primarily using Gnome as a platform, as opposed to shipping the default experience, and we're taking that platform and exposing it and integrating it into a distribution with millions of users, that to me seems like a reasonably good thing that we're doing for the Gnome platform because it's legitimizing the platform to a degree. I'm not saying that we're saying that we make you relevant by any stretch because there's lots of distributions, but I'm saying that if we're delivering a platform to a lot of people and perform the integration work and the marketing work and all that kind of stuff around it, therefore, if we want to enhance that platform pursuant to that work, I would have imagined that that would have been interesting and useful. I totally appreciate the fact that we can't throw a patch over the wall and expect it to be maintained by upstream for something that they don't use.
As like looking at this community situation and like big scheme, what's good for all of us? Yes, I see this. As an engineer with my engineering hat on, I don't care about that. It's not affecting engineering.
Can we get back? But my question was actually about application. So I can actually kind of see the GDK thing. So I think application developers often view GNOME differently than the people who contribute to the core to it. It's something that they use to deliver their applications. And so they may care about GNOME because they love the project values and that's where all their friends are everywhere. But I've met some people who also care a lot about Ubuntu because they get a lot of users on Ubuntu. And I guess I would just ask, pursuant to your question, my ask would be just can we ensure that it's socially acceptable for those application developers to care equally about both? And I wouldn't like to see some kind of meme or something.
There is some natural competition here, and I think as a company, Canonical has some commercial interest in winning mindshare for Ubuntu as a platform, and there will be some competition, like things like libunity. Probably, I'm guessing you want people to use libunity, which will inherently not make them able to run on, say, stock GNOME as shipped on Fedora. So there is certainly a competition here, and you're pushing people towards a place where they write applications that function only on Ubuntu. I don't have okay, so it sucks every time this happens for me. It's not good for GNOME if their application only runs on Ubuntu. But I don't see anything inherently wrong with that. I mean,
that they write Ubuntu specific application.
I think if that's.
I don't like it, but I don't see anything wrong with you pursuing that course.
I think that's the same problem with creating applications that only work well on GNOME.
Sure. I mean, different platforms.
Well, as someone who sometimes loves some applications, I feel really crappy when if I develop a cross-platform application that runs on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and another Linux as well. Crap, even more work for me. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that situation.
Well,
I have to do all the work 4 times instead of 3 times.
Fine. So I mean, I'm not saying I want people to feel compelled to do this. I would just not like it to make them feel like they're doing the socially righteous thing by by not supporting
No, I think
it's additive.
This is between you and individual developers, and you've had some success with individual developers within the GNOME project saying, hey, can you please add an optional dependency on
right. And we often submit patches and we usually take it.
Yeah, and that's between you and individual developers. And I see this optional dependency way of approaching things so that your application works well in both environments is probably a reasonable story for most app developers.
Other than them rejecting the patches.
But that's between you and them as app authors.
Okay, they've rejected it because.
But they're also in.
Right, yeah, what about the guys that say, well, I don't really know, I'll wait for whatever's the blessed GNOME thing to do, which is probably where more of them. So some people were like, sure, I'll be happy to take it. Another group were like, no way. And then there was a nice big fat bell curve of people who were saying, well, I like to see it proposed as a dependency and I'll take it based on whether it gets blessed.
These are
by
people
GNOME.
with a strong alliance to the GNOME project.
Right.
And I think they are interested, and it's a priority of theirs, and who are you to question it, that as app authors and as software developers, they're interested in promoting what's good for GNOME.
Right.
And it's their opinion that what you're doing is not. So they choose not to.
Okay.
And that's really a part of the competition of winning the mindshare of developers.
Okay.
And that's, game on.
Okay.
But saying it's a game and a competition is just.
Well,
it's a no-win. Right?
But
Let's say we destroyed GNOME.
No,
Oh wow, we didn't win anything.
There's a
That'd be
lot of
stupid.
opportunity for collaboration here.
Yes.
There's no reason to not have developer docs that say there's essentially 2 platforms or whatever.
Yeah.
Most of your code will run, but there's going to be some differences. Here's some boilerplate. Here's some best practices. If you already have a GNOME 3 app, here's some ways that you can you know, here's some patterns that you can use to extend it to Unity. If you already have a Ubuntu app, here's some patterns that you can do to make it run like something. But there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't collaborate on
Certainly.
making that easy.
At the same
And
time,
just-
like, yeah.
Just a direct response to what you said, if Canonical in Ubuntu is shipping libraries that are not part of Gnome and encouraging application developers to consume those libraries, then you are competing with us for what application developers view as the platform.
I don't think we are. I think what we're doing is we're taking the GNOME platform and adding different types of value to it.
Yes,
And
but if people target these APIs, then their programs don't run on GNOME
well,
because we don't have this library. So
Yeah.
it is a competition. I'm
it
not
just-
saying it's bad.
It just
but-
seems to me like a vicious circle. Is that I believe that all of that the intentions of Ubuntu and the intentions of GNOME are all, as Rick said, it's all from a position of love and good-hearted people, right? We're all trying to do the right thing here.
We don't have all the same values though.
We don't have all have the same values, I agree.
I mean-
From an application development perspective, like if I write an app, I just want it to run. First of all, I want it to run well on my machine, because that's what I'm running. And then hopefully it'd be nice if it runs on other people's machines as well. And to me, as an application developer, the first thing I look at is the GNOME platform, right? It's a wonderful platform. But I also want it to be used by people who are running I want it to be run by people who are using lots of different platforms like Fedora and Ubuntu and everything else. But I think there is value that is being brought by these additions made in Ayatana. And we can't get those additions into GNOME for various reasons. One of which is because we don't contribute enough to GNOME. So therefore it seems like a vicious circle because on one hand we're building value for application authors that I think sits on top of GNOME. GNOME are never going to take it because of various reasons. And that's the thing that I think is uneasy about the project, is that it feels to me like
It's the issue.
I hate to say it, feels to me like nothing's ever good enough. I hate to be so blunt, but this is me speaking Jono, not Jono at canonical.com. It feels like nothing's ever good enough.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I can say about that. One is that there are some technical concerns about the things that you do bring to the table. And I think a large part of the reason that those technical concerns exist are not because you're like a bunch of shit developers, but because your development model is that you develop things in secret and you throw them over the wall when they're done. And this is a real problem because maybe, okay, something you have that works really good for you, even if you do manage to get that far, which I don't think you can, because when you develop in the open, you have more criticism of the code, you know, many eyeballs, all this stuff. You end up with better code, I think. Second, by the very nature of it, even if your engineers are perfect, when you throw it over the wall, you have something that works great for you and doesn't consider other people's use cases.
I think, like,
Yeah, but you said Gnome doesn't consider other people's use cases.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, then you said Gnome is focusing down.
I'm saying
its
a
use
lot of
cases.
maintainers are viewing it this way.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I think it's fair, the criticism that's leveraged towards canonical developments and things in secrecy. I think it's a fair criticism. I think it's got better over the years. The difference between the way Notify OSD was developed compared to App Indicators, I think is completely different. But free software is free software. And what I'm saying is...
No, it's not.
I think it is. I think free software is free software. And what I'm saying is that if some free software is being developed that brings value to the GNOME platform, I think one piece of criticism that was leveraged in that whole discussion towards canonical that I think is absolutely fair and reasonable is that we didn't try hard enough to get this technology into GNOME.
Yes.
He's been trying to make a point for.
Yeah, I'm trying to add something. As not from Canonical, not from GNOME, have been trying to add to GNOME various patches or fixes or small things, like those not concerning only Ubuntu, but the platform as GNOME. And I have submitted some patches, 10 or doesn't matter, but only I guess one was accepted, and in the last 6 months I agree that I know that GNOME doesn't have resources for everything, but I think that this doesn't help contributors from Ubuntu or any other platforms who would like to contribute contribute, this is also a barrier, and I don't think that starting this and continuing this debate on Ubuntu versus Canonical, because it's sort of.
Can you clarify if your patch not being accepted was no, I don't like this idea,
No,
or
no
just
response
sitting
at
in
all.
Mozilla?
No response at all.
Yeah, this is straight resources.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say it because you already know what the answer is and you think, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is somewhere that we have a shortcoming, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, and like it's hard for us to fix this as well because like we can't really hire someone because like yeah we're not a company, like it's hard, and with patches in general, I mean like I have issues getting patches in as well, and like Jakub Steiner has problems getting graphics into application, and he's like the guy who has been drawing graphics for 10 years. He's like the master of this, but he still get pushback from maintainers because like it's hard for like core people as well.
Yeah, even people who are very highly respected have the same problems you have.
Yeah.
And also in that case, usually if you are more involved into the non-development, you know who to ping. So that, as Andreas is saying, yeah, we all file patches to Mozilla, and we don't get an answer, but if you are involved, you know who to ping.
Yeah,
You
it's
have to
really
file for your
bureaucracy,
patch.
and we're sorry.
I
it's
have
like
to fight
this.
for my patch when I'm not.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's nothing that you
Yeah.
against you, really, personally.
But yeah, we can really try to fix things with GNOME laws and
And after
stuff
the
like that.
session,
But, yeah.
let me know what it is. I'll check it out.
But I have a question in this direction. If I have a patch and get no response on Bugzilla, what can I do to push the patch into getting it accepted or discussed? Should I join the IRC channel or?
Yeah.
This helps. Pinging on IRC is actually,
You find-
like a lot of people are nervous about it because they think it's rude to be nagging, but like a ping on IRC is often helping at least get some initial feedback on the bug.
And sometimes you will just, if you get to the GNOME Hackers channel, for example, you point out that bug and just ask, like, can anybody help me to get this through? And maybe not the maintainer, maybe someone else will help you.
Who knows the maintainer can ping them.
Yeah.
You do have to press
The
because-
maintainers, there's a maintainer list in every Git repository. There's a dot file listing.
Maybe you should revisit adding voting to Bugzilla.
What?
Maybe you should revisit adding voting to Bugzilla.
No, please, not never ever.
So,
Hidden votes.
I mean, that statement, and I think that we've had the same experience, and that makes me concerned that GNOME isn't healthy, as we use the word health check, because, I mean, I queried Bugzilla for patches, somebody gave me a query on when I commented on Dave Neary's post, and I think it came up that the GTK has 450 unreviewed patches in Bugzilla,
Yeah.
which is.
You drink from the fire hose too. I mean, I think most people working at Ubuntu know how hard it is to keep up with bug mail.
But I think that says to me that we should be concerned about GNOME's health as a project.
So I think we should keep the conversation going. I was just going to say, in terms of the health check side of things, I think we spent a lot of this session really talking about a lot of things that we already know. I think in terms of the relationship of GNOME and Ubuntu, what I'd like to know from the perspective of the GNOME folks is, given where we stand today, Unity exists, GNOME Shell exists,
Kindle exists.
the focus, everything exists. The strategic direction, I think, is unlikely to change in terms of the GNOME project and in terms of Ubuntu. Given those, I don't want to say constraints, but given that reality, how can we work better together? What do you think are the best things we can do?
What do you want to work on? Like, what do you want to solve together with us? I think that's a big question.
I'd like to see is a mutual acceptance of the goals of each project and a collaboration around the areas in which they overlay.
This is like a recognition of the project's right to exist, sort of.
One thing I found a bit unfortunate is right after this report by Dave Neary, there wasn't a report from Canonical saying this is all we're doing for you guys.
Right.
So there were complaints about this report, but there were no actual numbers of all the hard work you're
Right,
doing.
because a
because
lot
I'm
of
pretty
the
sure.
stuff we do is soft and immeasurable. If I stand at a GNOME booth all day.
Well, find a way to measure it.
Well, I don't want to have one-upsmanship. Our number's bigger than your number.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
but
not a
at
useful
least-
discussion.
What were you really looking for there? Like just like an assertion of like
Well,
being able to articulate the value that we create?
yeah, I mean, I'll give one specific example of how you could be more, well, not you. I want to sound like I'm trying to put all the burden on your side, but how could you be more constructive? I think there's been a lot of negativity towards our community and not much constructive criticism.
Few solutions, maybe.
Yeah. So
maybe what we should do is maybe an interesting exercise. I don't know whether this is the best venue for it. It would be for us to sit down and identify like all the areas in which Ubuntu, like we do this, how all the areas in which we feel like Ubuntu has not excelled in this relationship. Like there's certain things that I could pick out. Like we have developed the software in Secret. I don't like that, and we have not worked hard enough to get those modules accepted into Gnome.
You're doing other things that anger people in the community, like copyright assignment.
Right, and you know, copyright assignment could be another. And I'm sure that there's perspectives from inside the Gnome camp about things that Gnome's not doing so well. And I think if we did that and then use that as a step forward to how can we see where the issues are and how can we resolve those. What I want to get away from is the one-upmanship, is the statistical analysis and the ping-ponging blog posts. So.
I guess that's why what I say is I found it unfortunate that there wasn't a positive approach to that. It's like it was all that I saw was a negative approach to the actual report instead of saying, you know, this is what we're doing, even if it's not about numbers.
And then we would have been told that that's not what Gnome is about. You guys just made it clear before that it was all about
well, also,
maintaining the modules.
I responded in an article to that, and I got dogpiled.
Yeah.
As well, to be fair. And so, I mean,
I think, my perspective on that was just not taking the bait was the best.
Yeah.
In terms of moving ahead.
Yeah, but I don't think it has to be directly related to the report. I just think that in general, it'd be nice if we could see more positive input.
I think if we have an honesty about our own failings, not an honesty about each other's failings, would be a really good start. Because no one's perfect, we've all screwed up, but I think that it's more important for us to fix this than to fight about it. And
but in doing so, I want, or I hope that there's recognition that Canonical is a company. You have an ability to focus your message, your policies, your direction. We're a community. We can say that we think it should be this way, but ultimately,
it's harder to gain consensus.
Yeah, we can't say that this is the new rule.
It's not even a goal to gain consensus.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a goal to create the project. Well, consensus maybe, but it's a goal to create critical mass, but it's not.
Yeah. I think
multiple viewpoints are tolerated.
I think that's
and I don't think that's a weakness of the project. I think it's a strength of the project.
But what I'm saying is that it's not fundamentally possible for, say, the foundation of Gnome to change everybody's mind about Canonical.
Agreed.
But we could definitely try. I mean, like we could run around and like talk to people and like.
Well, and the other thing as well is that I think, as Rick says, you know, multiple perspectives is a good thing, and I think we need to. I agree with you, right? Like, it's not like you can flip a switch, right, and everybody has the same perspective. I mean, we have. It's much easier for us to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and to talk about it and to work within our teams to understand that, and then to draw consensus much more quickly, because that's what companies can do. It's way harder in all communities. I mean, we struggle with that in Ubuntu as well, in Ubuntu the community project. But I think another thing which we could maybe help with is optimizing when you do want to find consensus in Gnome. So let's say Gnome is a project, even if it's something that is not what we do, maybe we can share ideas around how we can do that in Gnome. So if the a given governing body, because in the Ubuntu project, I think we actually are reasonably decent in the community project now, governing boards of defining consensus, just over the years.
In the spirit of recognizing our own weaknesses, this is something we're discussing.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's going to be hard, and it's going to take a while.
And again, because we have to convince, like, you know, if we do come up with some kind of a technical governance, we might have revolting maintainers because I no longer have absolute authority. Well, screw you.
So should we do this? Should we grab a post-it notepad at some point and do this exercise?
Yeah, we'll do this.
Because I think it would be interesting and it would set the conversation on the right. But I mean,
on the record, going back to something Ted said about we have like 450 like unreviewed patches in GTK. Could we get some help?
I think there's no reason why we shouldn't talk about that. I don't make the decisions on the
Of course
resource.
not, but like if you're open to this, like
Could
like
it be,
really
could
this
it
would
be
be
a
good
different
for us.
kind of help? We run things like bug days where we, fix something, we run 2-3 projects. Could we say we're gonna run a bug day for Gnome?
Well,
Is that helpful?
we run our own processes like this.
But it's just different,
you
different
could-
set of
Yeah.
people.
Like if you
we
direct
might
your
have
audience
people
towards
that-
us, this could be helpful.
It's not only a review thing either, it could be just like a Q&A, a bug person.
I mean, yeah, I think it's one of those
Looking
things
at
where
it.
I think it'd be very difficult for us to throw developers just at reviewing those patches, just based upon my knowledge of how Canonical works, because we've got ambitious Ubuntu goals, but I think that we should explore, like Alison says, there's lots of different ways in which we can work together.
But now that I think about it, the problem is not that we have a lack of people trying to use patches from the community. The problem is that we don't have someone there to do the boring work of dredging through all of them. Establish
That's what bug
themselves.
days usually are. They're not submit a bunch of bugs, they're review bugs, and then you have someone there to guide you through.
So this is something I used to do a lot before I was ever even involved with Ubuntu, try to get more people to get involved at that level with reviewing patches and just say, do they still apply? Do they still fix the bug, or does the bug even still exist? But I could never get interest in getting people to do that, but maybe reaching out to the Ubuntu community, we could actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be a great thing for us to do, is to sync the two communities up in many ways. So like
There's a lot of value in just saying, this patch is 4 years old, doesn't apply anymore, throw it away. Just clean the list up, or the bug's not there anymore.
And the other thing is that we've faced similar kind of bottleneck issues in Ubuntu, and we've developed some knowledge around that. So for example, how we, like the sponsorship queue, we struggled in terms of keeping up with that, and the project clean sweep and all that kind of stuff, in terms of plowing through patches. So there's some things we learned that I think could be good knowledge to transition to the Gnome community as well, that might be useful. So.
We'll meet afterwards.
Yeah, definitely.
That's it, we're out of time.
I have no idea about that library.